What do you think when people say there is only one correct way to speak English?
Correctness has been a major theme in the history of English, and the answer to that question is rather long, and it's a very complex issue. So I'm just going to make a few points. It's an issue that I talk about at great length in my new book. That new book begins at the beginning of the 18th century, and it wasn't long before then, a couple of centuries before then, when there really was only one standard version of English, and that was British English. Britain owned English in those days. If you now look today, the situation has changed absolutely dramatically. There are varieties of English spread throughout the entire world, and Britain no longer owns the English language at all. I mean, if I can give you some statistics, number of English speakers in Britain speaking English, about 63 million. Number of native speakers of English in the world, about 379 million. And number of non-native speakers of English in the world, about 753 million. So English is no longer the property of the British, it's the property of the world. And that means that many versions of correctness have sprung up. Every time a new variety appears, there are people who attack it in terms of correctness. At the time when American was becoming an accepted form of the language, the Brits were furious. They made terribly rude remarks about the English language. It's a corruption of the English language, it's a degradation of the language, and so on and so forth. Then along came Australian, and the same noises were made, not just by the Brits, interestingly, but by the Americans too, the very people who'd had their language criticised. And then many are similar examples. One of the languages I talk about in the book is the English pidgin used in Papua New Guinea. Well, some of the press that language got was absolutely dreadful. Degradation, barbaric, uncivilized, and all because of its lack of correctness. Of course, all these views soon disappear. And for example, now there are many parts of the world in which American English is not only accepted, but it's absolutely the model on which people use for learning. The kinds of arguments that people use to support correctness are quite interesting. And again, it's something I discuss in the book. Logic is one of them. I mean, you've probably heard, the use of the double negative when people put two negatives in a sentence, which is a crime to some people, some grammarians. The logic is two negatives make a positive. So the argument goes, when you do two negatives, you mean a positive, which of course is false logic. At least it doesn't work like that anyway. Origins of words is another one, especially going back to Greek and Latin meanings. There was a very good example in the 1930s of a lawyer who attacked a witness in a court case because he used the word hysterical to describe a man. And the lawyer said, well, hysterical comes from the Greek word meaning womb, as in our word hysterectomy today. And men don't have wombs, so it's wrong. It's incorrect to call a man hysterical. Only women can be hysterical because only women have wombs. Well, all these arguments and many others I discuss in the book are full of holes. And even when they're not full of holes, the fact of the matter is that the way language works is it's what controls it is usage rather than logic or what the words meant in Latin or Greek. You can't really, language goes its own way and you can't really do much to correct it. I, like everyone else, have my points that make me angry. When people say between you and I get very hot under the collar because it should be between you and me. You can't say between you say between me, etc. Well, that's fine. But you're deluded if you think that's going to make any difference. The language will go its own way. There's nothing you can do to stop the tide. There's just one thing I'd like to add, and that is that for some people, it is absolutely right that they should have a notion of correctness, or perhaps a better word would be appropriateness. And those are teachers. When you're teaching someone, for example, let's say academic English, You've got to teach them that it would be inappropriate or incorrect, if you like, to use contracted verb forms or very informal lexicon. So that's an area where I don't think there are times where we have to be prescriptive, but it's a very slippery concept and one that's difficult to come to terms with.